Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Shake the Table with Will Horn. It's the first Thursday of the month. It's amazing how it seems like time is just flying by. We are in October. My great-grandmother told me many, many years ago when I was a kid, she said that the older you get, the faster it seems that time goes by. And I'm telling you, that has proven to be true. And it's one of the other reasons that I, in my own life, and I try to encourage other folks to not waste time. We've got only a little bit of time to do whatever we have been placed here in the earth to do. And we can't procrastinate. We got to get it out of us, okay? And so tonight is my effort to do just that, to create this space where we can come together and we can have these table-shaking conversations. I don't necessarily consider them controversial, but some people do, because many times the subject matter that we deal with is really challenging the embedded theologies of many of the folks in Christendom, things that we have thought for a long time or believed or practiced for a long time. We talk about those things in different ways and from different perspectives and with nuance sometimes that causes people to think that they are controversial. But hey, if we got to shake the table to get people thinking, if we've got to shake the table to get people free from religious oppression, then so be it. So welcome to you, my table shakers, okay? So let's go ahead and get to work, okay? Tonight, we're going to be dealing with the subject, I told you, we're going to be dealing with the mark of the beast, okay? Something probably all of us have heard of, maybe many of us have read about in the book of the Revelation of the Apostle John. And if you've been in church, or even if you've been out of church and you've heard anything about this particular conversation, it can be a bit disconcerting. It can be unnerving, so to speak, because the idea of the mark of the beast, or this 666, has this ominous death-dealing kind of connotation to it. And what I want to do tonight is to create a space where we can have a little bit of a Bible study, so to speak, because that's kind of what it's going to be. We're going to dig into the text as much as we can in these few minutes that we have. Certainly, there's no way that I can decode or unravel or even properly exegete the whole book of Revelation in just an hour. There's just no way to do it. There are people who have studied for years and gotten PhDs in just this one book. So I want to make sure I lay that disclaimer here that this is just to create space for you to think and for you to begin your study, your journey of understanding what this text is really saying, okay? And so, tonight, I want to talk about what the mark of the beast is and what it is not, and hopefully bring about some clarity and some peace about this, and get you to a place where you're not afraid to go read the book of Revelation, okay? So, I want to say also, because I'm very, very conscious of making sure I give credit where credit is due. When I was maybe in my, maybe third year of school, I kind of stretched school out a little bit, because I'm an adult and I have other things to do. And so my degree plan probably should have taken me about 2.5 years. It took me almost 4. But in the third year of that, I took some really very interesting classes that were about New Testament exegesis, really being able to pull apart what the Christian Testament, or what we call the New Testament, pulling it apart and understanding it a little better. And I remember I was sitting in a class. It was a New Testament class. Dr. Jeremy Williams, brilliant young scholar, Harvard PhD, but he was one of my professors, and we were having a conversation about the book of Revelation. And in that conversation, he said something to me that changed my entire perspective about this book. And when I shared with you on tonight, I think it's probably going to do the same thing for you. So let's dig. Okay, this whole notion about the mark of the beast, the very idea again of the 666 on your forehead or on your wrist or whatever, has pretty much had the church in an uproar since the inception of the church. It's just been one of those things that we have had different perspectives about since the really very beginning, and that hasn't changed. I do want to say, and I want to introduce some terms tonight, that the discussion of books like the Revelation, books like Daniel, they're the books that we call books of prophecy, so to speak, deal with something called eschatology. That's a big, long word, basically, for the study of the end times. Okay. And so there are a lot of people who read books like Daniel and read books like the Revelation, and they try to figure out how it is applicable to us in modern times. They try to figure out what those texts say to us about the end of times, or the belief of the return of Jesus Christ. Okay, so eschatology is that word. It's eschatology, eschatology. Now that I've given you that word, I want to let you know that I am one who, I don't give a lot of energy to studying eschatology for two reasons. Number one, I believe that the study of the end times takes our focus away from being the people that we are called to be in this earth for today. If we are obsessed with being raptured or snatched away, if we are obsessed with the end of the world, then I believe that we are distracted from fulfilling purpose. We are distracted from being and doing and having all of those things that God intended for us while we are yet alive. Okay? And so instead of focusing on the end time, focus on the time that we are in. Okay? So that's one reason that I don't give a lot of energy to eschatology. The other reason is because Jesus in the Gospels said that no man knows the day or the hour of the return of the Son of Man. Jesus even said, even I don't know. And so for us to spend our time trying to decode something and come up with an answer that really has nothing to do with us. If it is God's intention that Jesus is to return, and we could talk about that at another time, but that's up to God. That doesn't have anything to do with us. And so I believe more in spending our time on learning how to live abundantly, bring Christ consciousness into our now, and leave eschatology, just leave it alone. But we got to talk about it, okay? Because when we have a conversation about the book of Revelation, it falls into that study of eschatology. That's the only reason that I raise it tonight. Okay, so are you guys following me? All right, I feel like I kind of went around the bushes to talk about that, but hopefully you understand a little bit more about what eschatology is and how it applies or does not apply to your perspective. Okay, so that's that. Okay. I got a whole lot of notes here on tonight. I hope I can get through all of them, and I hope they are not too much, because I can do that sometimes. I hope they're not too much. But nonetheless, giving credit to where credit is due, a lot of what we will discuss tonight comes from a paper that's written by a gentleman named Evan Minton. He writes for this group called Cerebral Faith, basically thinking faith. He wrote this paper back in 2018, and when I read it, I was like, wow, he really has put together a lot of the thoughts that I have surrounding this. And so as I am in conversation with you, we will all be in conversation with some of the thoughts of Evan Minton from Cerebral Faith, okay? So I want to tell you that, how can I put it? We have, for the most part, gotten Revelations wrong, okay? If you come from a background like I come from, maybe a Christian or religious background, if you would go to church and the preacher would stand and say that, our text today is coming from Revelation, book, chapter, verse, there would be this cooling that would happen in the sanctuary. People would even sometimes audibly say, ooh, like it was spooky story time or something like that. Revelation has always had this mystique. I don't know if they did that in y'all's church, but they did it in mine. It was like this spooky thing that no one dared touch the revelation. And again, it is because a lot of people look at all of the symbolism and all of the beasts with the 7 heads and all of these kinds of things as frightening. And so they just didn't want to touch it. But I want to try as much as I can in these few minutes that we have together to try to demystify it a little bit for you, okay? And so, I come from one of those kind of traditions where if there was an earthquake or a hurricane or there was a war going on in another part of the world, or if some bad person did some bad thing, the old saints would say, what the Bible talks about this, that all of this stuff was going to happen in the end times. This is just the Bible fulfilling itself. I know I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that's heard that. When anything would happen, that meant it was about to be over. Jesus was about to return, and it was the fulfillment of the book of Revelation. Anybody ever hear that? I see you. You've heard it too, okay? I want to say very clearly, very soberly, and this may shake the table for some of you, the book of Revelation has absolutely nothing to do with anything that is going on beyond the 1st century. Did you hear me? The book of Revelation has absolutely nothing to do with anything beyond the 1st century. So all the wars and rumors of wars and hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes and all of those things have nothing to do with the book of Revelation. Okay? So now that you know that, now that you have that as the basis of this conversation, let's do some work. Okay? The book of Revelation is actually the revelation of the Apostle John the Beloved, okay, the one who walked with Jesus. This is a revelation that he received when he was out all by himself on the Isle of Patmos. This was after Jesus had died, and we now are towards the end of the 1st century. This is maybe 60 years after Jesus had gone. I think it is said that the book of Revelation was penned around AD 95. And we believe that Jesus left somewhere between AD 30 and AD 35. So we got some years behind us here. And a lot of things have happened since Jesus left. Okay. And so John here, again, towards the end of his life, gets this revelation when he's out alone by himself. And he's talking about this beast. These beasts. There are actually, I think, 3 beasts that show up in Revelation. But we're talking about this beast with this grotesque thing with all of these heads, who looks like a leopard, and it's just weird stuff, almost like John had an edible or something. You know what I'm saying? It's just, maybe I just said too much. But anyway, if you've had an edible before, you see strange things. Amen. And so he's out here talking about all of this stuff, and those of us who are so far removed from John's time, so far removed from the first century and the goings on of the Roman Empire during that time, it's hard for us to look back on John's writing and make sense of it. It's hard to do because we don't really have a point of reference. Okay? All that we can do many times with what we understand is anachronistically put what we understand and what we know and what we've experienced, we can put that back onto scripture, but that's improper. That's not what we are supposed to do if we want to really understand what the writer was saying. Okay, so it's important to know that John was writing for an audience that lived during his time. He was specific, and we're going to deal with some scriptures so that you will see that I'm not making any of this up. John was writing to his people. He was not writing to us. Okay? So let's move on. He talked about, again, the beast and talked about this entity that was going to reign on the earth for 7 years before Jesus came, and again talked about this 666. I'm going to tell you how we get to that in just a moment. How that was going to be on the heads of all of the people, and nobody was going to be able to buy anything or sell anything. And some people were afraid, when a lot of the businesses started going cashless and we were using our debit cards and Bitcoin and all of this kind of stuff. They were like, okay, this is proof of revelation. This is what John was talking about. No, it's not. But let me keep going. Okay. It talks about the Antichrist a lot. And I want to make sure that we understand this whole conversation of how the Antichrist and this beast either go hand in hand or how they're two separate entities altogether. Okay. But many people believe that this Antichrist and the beast really are just two different ways of addressing the same entity. Okay. And so sometimes they'll be interchangeable there. But people, because we're funny and because we can be deep sometimes, and because we want to dig into eschatology and decode everything, people have been trying to figure out who this Antichrist is. They want to know who this person is. Some people said it was Hitler. Some people said that it was Ronald Reagan. Some people have said it was President Obama. Some people have said it was the Pope. Even today, when you turn on the news and see how, one particular political figure in the United States carries on, you would think that it was him. The orange one, you would think that that was the Antichrist. But again, it is important for us to understand. Hold on. Can you all hear my dogs barking? They're really carrying on. But anyway, if you hear them, just overlook them. Listen to me. Don't listen to them. But nonetheless, Hitler, the Pope, President Obama, Ronald, none of those people are the Antichrist. That was not what Revelation was talking about. And so if that is something that you've heard, something maybe that you have internalized or believed, I want to root that up for you. Okay. And I'm being very intentional. I'm digging up some embedded ideas about Revelation because it has kept us from really understanding the real message of the book of Revelation and the way that we can really apply it to our lives today. Okay, so the Antichrist is none of those people. How would you feel if I told you that the Antichrist that John was speaking of in the Revelation will never come? What if I told you that this whole idea that an antichrist or a person that Revelation was talking about here, what if I told you that according to Revelation, that person would never come or never be revealed? I'm shaking the table tonight, okay? What if I told you that is true because the Antichrist that John was speaking of has already lived and died? I ought to hear you shouting through the video screen right now. The Antichrist that we've been sitting up worrying about and trying to do eschatology to figure out and all of that. What if I told you, according to John's revelation, that Antichrist has already lived and already died? Y'all holding on? You got your wigs pinned on good? Okay, because we're going to do some Bible study now. I'm just going to read the scriptures tonight. Okay, you don't have to believe anything I say. You can grab your own Bible and read these same words. Okay. Whew, my God. Okay. I'm not supposed to shout on Shake the Table. I'm just supposed to shake the table. But I need you to know that this Antichrist that you are worrying about, according to John, has already lived and died. All right, so we're moving on. I'm going to read something here. It's a whole passage out of the Revelation, okay? I have to read this because you have to hear it, and you have to have heard it because I'm going to refer back to it, okay? So I'm going to read it. I'm going to try to read it as quickly as I can. I'll try to make it as interesting as possible, but I need this to be read into your hearing. I'm going to read from Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 8, and then I will pick up and read verses 16 through 18. Okay, so if you'd like to write that down, Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 8, and then again verses 16 through 18. And the scripture reads, "The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had healed." We're going to come back to that in a minute. "The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given the authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, 'Who is likened to the beast? Who can wage war against it?' The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opens its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world." 16. "It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, that number is 666. Okay. Now, I know I just read a whole lot. I'm not going to read it again. I hope you wrote it down. So if you need to go back and refer to it, you can. But we will use this as the foundation of our conversation on tonight. Again, we are just reading from the text, and we're not even going to do a deep exegesis of text tonight. We're just really doing a plain reading. But many times, deep, profound truth is hiding in plain sight. But because our eyes have not been trained to see it, we miss it. Okay? And one of the things that I love is that once you learn something, once you see something, once you experience something, you can't unlearn it or unsee it or unexperience it. Okay? And so once you get this tonight, you will be changed. Your perspective will be changed. Okay? And so I want to make a few points tonight. There are three things that I really want to kind of to pull out about this particular text to prove a point. Okay. The first point I want to make is that I kind of made it already, but I want to give you some support here, is that the Apostle John's revelation here was for the people of his time. He was writing this letter almost like a warning. You know what I'm saying? Like an alarm, code red. You got to read this because something is going on that you need to know about. Okay. And so Revelation chapter 1, verse 1 actually supports my argument that this was written for the people of that time. Let me read it for you. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things that must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John. And so at the very beginning of the book of Revelation, we learn that this revelation was given to John because there were some things that were getting ready to happen soon. Turn to your neighbor and say soon. They were getting ready to happen soon. Okay? If you read the New Living Translation, if you read the English Standard Version, it uses the word soon. If you read the King James Version, it'll say soon to come to pass or shortly to come to pass, something like that. If you read the Common English Version, it says must happen very soon. All of these translations are communicating the same idea that this revelation, this book was written because there were some things that were getting ready to jump off and John needed to let the people know. So all indications were that John intended for his audience to understand that the prophecies that he was releasing, they were expected to come to pass in their lifetime. Now, let me give a little bit more context. Again, I told you that John walked with Jesus. John was the beloved. Okay? He lived in the first century. We are now towards the end, 95 AD or so. Okay? These things were expected to happen either in the first century or going into the second century, but they were supposed to be within those people's lifetime. Revelation 1:3 says, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written, for the time is near. So soon, time is near. Again, John is telling us right up front, these prophecies are for people in the first and second century. Okay. So again, just a plain reading of these texts tells us that this didn't have anything to do with us who would be living almost 2,000 years later. And see, again, so this idea of eschatology, this idea of trying to decode the book of Revelation to try to make it apply to anything that is happening in our time is a misapplication of the scripture. And when there is a concerted misapplication of the scripture, you have to always ask yourself, why? Why are they trying to use the book of Revelation to scare you? Why is the book of Revelation being used to create this ominous air within Christendom? And the answer is very simple. This idea of eschatology and this idea of fear-mongering is to keep people under control. I hope I'm talking clear. I hope you all are hearing what I'm saying. John was talking to his people. He was not talking to us who lived 2,000 years later. So this is putting the book of Revelation in context for us. When John said, as a matter of fact, let me refer to one of the epistles of John, because we've got Revelation, but then we have John 1, John 2, John 3. One of the epistles in 1 John, he says, "Dear children," here we go again with this same right now language, "this is the last hour. And as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming," remember they're talking about in the first century, "even now, many antichrists have," past tense, "come. This is how we know it's the last hour." He says many antichrists have already come. And so what he's saying in Revelation, he said in the first epistle. There are some signs that have happened to let us know, because they believed that the end was near. They expected Christ to return during their lifetime. So when John said we're at the last hour, and Jesus revealed things to me that must soon take place, and the time is near, again, do you think he meant any of those prophecies were for us? I don't think you think that. Okay? So my first point, the revelation was for his time. It was not for us. The second point I want to make. He told the people to calculate the number. Y'all remember that when I just read that in the passage? 13 and 18 says, "Calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man." That number is 666. The key word here is calculate. Calculate. How do you calculate, which has to do with numbers, how do you calculate the number of the name of the beast? I'm glad you asked. There's another word I want to give you. It's called gematria. Gematria. It comes from the same root as the word geometry. Gematria. It is a method of biblical interpretation where each letter in the Hebrew alphabet also has a number. This number is then used to extract hidden meanings from words and biblical texts that'll actually transform names and concepts. It'll transform them into numbers, okay? And so you could have my name. I don't know, how to do all of that, but my name has a numerical value. Your name has a numerical value. When we look in the ancient Hebrew, this is how ancient Hebrews did, not biblical interpretation, because they didn't have Bible like we have it, but this is how they understood certain concepts and names. They had letters and numbers. Okay, let's go farther. Gematria, from the same root again as geometry, it was very, very common back then. And again, context is important. Okay, remember, if John was writing to his people understood what it meant to calculate a name. They understood that. Okay? So, the question would be, why would John tell them that they needed to calculate the name? Why did he just say the name? Why was he writing in code? Why was he using all of these symbols and weird metaphors? Why was he doing that? Okay? And again, when we read the text, we have to ask these questions. This is the only way we're going to really understand what the text is saying. Why was he doing this? Well, there was a reason for it. And again, this is where understanding history becomes important. During John's life, during his time, after the death of Jesus Christ, you have to realize that they were living under the rule of the Roman Empire. Okay? Remember, the Romans were the ones who arrested Jesus and hung Jesus from the cross. Remember, crucifixion was a Roman way of execution. So all of this was under the Roman Empire. Okay? Now, it is important to understand why the Christians were having such a problem under the Roman Empire. See, the Romans and the Greeks, or this Hellenistic idea of society, they had their own what was called imperial cult. In other words, they had their own gods. The Romans, the Greeks, they had their own pantheon of gods. They were polytheistic. They had different ideas about worship. But one of the things that was important to know is that they held the Caesar, or the emperor, up as divine or as a deity. And you had to worship. You had to worship the emperor. If you know anything about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you understand this whole concept of this requirement to bow down to the king, because the king was looked at like a god. Are you all following me? Okay? And so at the time of John's life, from, I believe it was AD 58. Oh, I should have written the dates down, but I think from AD 58 to about AD 64, they had maybe it was a little bit longer than that, but they had an emperor. His name was Nero. Nero is how we spell it. Okay. It was a big, long name, but just Nero. Nero was a young emperor. I think he got to the throne when he was like 17. He was young, but Nero was a bad mamma jamma. He was rough. And even a lot of the, non-Christian historians wrote about Nero. I made a note of some of them. Where are we at? Tacitus wrote about Nero and said that he had a cruel nature, and he put to death so many men. He was just mean. Pliny the Elder wrote about Nero, said that he was the destroyer of the human race and that he was poison to the world. Juvenal was a Roman satirist. He wrote about Nero and said that Nero's cruel, how can I put it? He was a cruel and bloody tyrant, is what Juvenal called him. So Nero was this bad, bad guy. And under Nero is when Christians first started to be officially persecuted. Because again, you got to remember, the Greeks, the Romans, they have this imperial cult that everybody was subject to. Everybody had to fall in line with this imperial cult. Well, the Jesus followers, they were not bowing down to anyone except Jehovah. That was the problem. And so the Romans saw the Christians as a problem, and so they persecuted them. And so Christianity, in many regards, had to be underground. You know how it was during American slavery. Black folks in this country couldn't speak openly. They had to speak in code. They had to braid up the women's hair and put maps in their braids. They had to have songs that they sang that the slave master thought were just songs, Negro spirituals, but they were actually talking about how to get on the Underground Railroad and all of these different types of things. And so John is talking in code to tell the other Jesus followers what's going on, what to be aware of in a way that the Romans and Nero don't understand. Are you all following me? Again, this is why you have to understand context. You can't just read the words off the page and expect to understand what these people who were in antiquity, thousands of years, I don't understand teenagers today. Their language is weird to me today. So the language and the context with which these people wrote is very, very different from ours. And so we do violence. We do violence to the text when we try to impose our modern understanding on writings from antiquity. Okay? So John was writing in code. Now, here's the interesting thing. By the time John was writing the Revelation, Nero was dead already. He'd been dead probably 20 or 30 years. He was dead. But catch this. Nero was so bad and so feared that people felt like, even though some folks thought he was dead, other people thought that it was impossible. Remember, I told you in the reading that you can refer back to, it says that the beast had received a mortal wound. In other words, the beast had been killed, but it went on to say that the beast was healed of that mortal wound. And there were some people who believed, okay, we don't see Nero. People are saying he's dead, but Nero is so bad, Nero might not be dead. Or if he is dead, he might come back. And we want to make sure that if he does come back, he doesn't come back and persecute us again. And so he had to write all of this stuff in code. I think you got that. Let me move on from that. Let me move on. So they had to write it. They had to write in code. And so he said to the people in his audience, John did, that we got to decode the name of this beast. You got to calculate it. I can't say it out loud. I can't speak it out loud. But because you have wisdom and insight and you understand this, you can calculate the name. And he said it is 666, the number of man. And so if you look at Nero's name, the whole name is Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. That was his whole name. And if you took those letters, took that name and added all of those letters up, that's how you come up to the 666. Okay, that's how we get there. So again, the second point that I am making here again is that John had to write this to calculate the name because he needed to speak to what was going on in their time, not our time. The third point to help us to understand that Revelation was not for now. It was not for now. Is that the prophecy wasn't sealed. And let me talk about that. Let's go back to Daniel. Again, another book of prophecy. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, it says, "But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge, but you roll up the scroll because it's not time. It will be revealed in the end time." Okay? So if a prophecy is for a later time, you roll up the scroll because it's for the people then. In Revelation chapter 22, verse 10, and again, I know I just read 13, but again, if you're going to understand context, you got to read pre-text and post-text. So in post-text, we're looking at Revelation 22 and 10. The angel of God told John, that he told me, do not seal up the words of prophecy in this book because the time is near. Revelation 22 and 10, the angel told John, do not seal up the words of prophecy in this book because the time is near. There's a book called End Time Prophecy is Not What They Told You. It's by this guy named Brian Godawa. I think that's how he pronounces it. It's Godawa, Brian Godawa. He says, when a prophecy was not to occur for thousands of years, the angel would seal up the book. But when a prophecy was about to occur in the near lifetime of the prophet, he said, do not seal up the book. So if John's revelation was to occur thousands of years later in a modern time period, the angel would have said to seal up the book, but he did not. Let's go on further. Revelation 17 talks about this vision that John had of this beast. It says, here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and one is, which means one lives, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So Revelation 17 is starting to give us some of this imagery now. This imagery. Here is the mind that hath wisdom. There are 7 heads and are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. All of that is imagery that the people of John's time would have understood. Let me help you understand it. Most New Testament scholars agree that what is being discussed here when we're talking about these 7 heads and these 7 mountains, most scholars agree that this reference is to Rome, the seat of the empire, the seat of the Roman Empire. These 7 mountains and these 7 heads are talking about Rome. And the question now is why or how? What does this 7 mountains mean? Well, because in antiquity, again, during John's time, Rome was famous for being called the city on 7 hills. It's like we call New York the Big Apple. Everybody knew that Rome was the city on 7 hills. And so making that reference of the 7 mountains, they understood that the beast with these 7 heads, which represented the 7 mountains, was talking about Rome. Rome was the beast. Nero, the emperor, was the beast. Not Trump, not Obama, not Hitler, not the Pope, not Reagan, not any of these people. The beast was Rome. Are you hearing me? It was Rome. How could the recipients of this letter, John's revelation, the folks that were a part of the 7 churches in Asia Minor, Galatians, Ephesians, Corinthians, all of the churches, how could they understand John's writing to be about some future, something 2,000 years later? They wouldn't have understood that. But they would have understood the 7 mountains that referred to Rome, because they were all under Roman oppression and subjugation. So what we thought Revelation was before we came to shake the table tonight was this spooky, weird, eschatological thing that spoke to times to come. Now we understand that the letter was basically an urgent email to the 7 churches to say, be aware of the empire. Be aware. Know who is who and protect yourself. Don't receive the mark of Rome. Don't receive the mark of the beast, the emperor. Are you following me? And so in these last couple of minutes that I got, because I've talked a little bit longer than I wanted to, I'm not going to get through all my notes, but it's okay. When we look again at this imagery, remember, it's this woman sitting on a horse. This woman, she's riding on this horse. She's riding on the mountain. She's got these 10 horns and all these blasphemous sayings. She's doing. Who is the woman? I wonder. Who is the woman? In this context, most theologians and scholars, Bible scholars, believe that the woman riding on this horse, this Roman horse associated with Rome, was Israel. Now, I'm not going where you think I'm going. This doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in Israel at the moment, because the geopolitical state that was formed in 1948, who is led by Benjamin Netanyahu, is not the same Israel that we find in the Hebrew text. I want to make sure we are clear about that, okay? So the state of Israel is not the same as the people of Israel that we find in the Old Testament. Now, that doesn't mean that they are not from the Jewish tradition, that they are not Hebrew people, but the Jewish state and the Hebrew people are not the exact same, okay? And so when I say that Israel was the woman riding on this horse with these blasphemies, it is to say that Israel, the prostitute, had turned its back on God and associated itself with empire. For those of you who saw my little video marketing thing, I told you I was going to tell you how and why I believe the church today, the people who name the name of Jesus Christ, have taken on the mark of the beast, because they have taken on the mark of empire. Empire. Whenever you hear someone make that reference, particularly in a biblical sense, empire is this construct of domination. Empire is this construct of imperialism and colonization and plunder and regime change and oppression. Empire represents domination. And what has happened is the church, whether unwittingly or intentionally, has aligned itself with an idea or a construct of domination and control. As a matter of fact, the church has been used as a tool and an arm for colonialization, imperialism. Africa would have never been colonized if it had not been for Christian missionaries doing the bidding of empire. I feel myself getting passionate right now. But the church has sold itself out, because when you align yourself with empire, you align yourself with power. And there are a whole lot of people leading these churches who have the same mindset as Nero. They have the same tyrannical, cruel, power-hungry, money-hungry mindset as Nero. And the way that you get the power of Nero is to become a tool or a sycophant of Nero. And unfortunately, the churches, this is why so many Christians find it so easy to idolize a tyrant. Are you following me? It is why over 80% of evangelical Christians align themselves with empire. I hope you're hearing me, church. This is the message of Revelation. It is not this spooky Antichrist thing to come. The Antichrist is already here. The Antichrist is already in operation, and it is aligned with empire. And so, just like John, wrote a letter to warn the people of his time to calculate the name of the beast. I challenge you. And it's easy to do because the beast is called empire. The beast is this construct of domination and control. Don't align yourself with that. Jesus was on the side of the oppressed. That's why the Romans I hope y'all heard me tonight. I didn't mean to preach like this. But you need to understand what the mark of the beast is. Don't receive it. Don't let him put it on your head. Don't let him put it on your wrist. Don't fall for the tricks of empire. Jesus didn't call us to domination. Jesus called us to liberation. I got to say amen right there. Okay. Thank you all for sitting through all my crazy talk. But we have to know better, because I believe when we know better, we do better. I want to encourage y'all to do something. Things are growing and things are changing. I'm building a community, okay? A table shaker community, of which I consider you all are a part. And so, if you want to be a part of this table shaker community, I want to challenge you to do something. After we are finished on tonight, I want to challenge you to text the number 866-646-3888. Just text the word shake to that number. I've actually put it in the caption on here so you can go back and look at it. But if you text shake to that number, it'll ask you for your email address. Send me the email address, and that way you'll be able to be a part of things that are coming up. I'll be able to communicate with you outside of Facebook and let you know what's going on, okay? I'll be telling you things about what's going on YouTube. If there is a live event that's going to be coming to your area, if there's some stuff that we need to let you know about that's going on, I want to be able to either shoot you a quick text message or send you an email. So if you would, text the word SHAKE, S-H-A-K-E, to 866-646-3888. Also, go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, share it with somebody, click the bell so that you can be notified when new videos go up. Also, as we are growing this community, I would ask that you would partner with me, not just with your time, but also financially. Again, I told you all that we are working fervently on getting the podcast up. I actually am going to release some artwork as soon as we get off so that you can see we are working diligently. I got a whole studio in my office in here, but there's lights and the microphone and the soundboard. All of this stuff is set up already. We're getting ready to do some stuff to put the backdrop up in here. We got lighting up, just all kinds of stuff that's going on. And all of this stuff costs me money. So if you all would, if you are enjoying this, if this is being a blessing to you, would you consider partnering with me? You can do that by sending a love gift on Cash App. It's $ Wilhorn Ministries. You can do it on Venmo. It's Wilhorn Ministries. You can go to the website, Explore Wilhorn, and send a gift there. It would just be a blessing to me. I'm so excited about what God is doing. And I'm grateful that you all want to be a part of it as well, okay? So I want you to know I'm praying for you. I'm asking that you would pray for me as we all continue to grow stronger and elevate our consciousness. And we're going to shake these tables together. Amen? I love you guys so very much. And I hope you have an amazing week. Y'all take care.